In 2018, popular animated series Steven Universe featured the first LGBTQ wedding shown in a kids' animated TV show. You heard that correctly. The year was 2018, and kids were finally able to see a visual representation of a queer cartoon couple getting married on their screens. The creator of the show, Rebecca Sugar, identifies as bisexual, non-binary, and genderqueer, so it isn't surprising the show included this groundbreaking achievement in LGBTQ history. But according to Sugar, it took years of painstaking work chipping away at the network to get to that moment. The history of queerness in animation has been decades of harmful stereotyping, queer baiting, queer coding, and straight-up misrepresentation. If queer writers, actors, animators, and viewers have existed since the inception of televised cartoons, we just have to ask, why did it take so long to get here? We're taking a look back over the last 90 years, from the Hays Code to SpongeBob SquarePants, to see how queerness in animation and its critical reception has evolved over the years. Now, let's pause here for a moment. There has been representation of queer characters and storylines in animated series prior to 2018, but that content has mostly been reserved for adult animation. From 1990 to 1994, the most prominent show in terms of LGBTQ characters was The Simpsons. However, many of the queer characters in the show were secondary and rarely in positions of power. The show's first episode aired on December 17, 1989, and introduced Waylon Smithers, who was named after gay puppeteer Wayland Flowers. Smithers was the first gay character to appear on a US animated show. However, like other shows at the time, The Simpsons approached the subject gingerly, to say the least, in hopes to not draw overt attention to sexuality. Smithers remained in the closet, officially, until 2016. It wasn't until 2005 that The Simpsons aired an episode, There's Something About Marrying, dedicated entirely to same-sex marriage with the public outing of Marge's sister, Patty Bouvier, as a lesbian in Love. The episode was inspired by the 2004 same-sex weddings that occurred in San Francisco, and according to executive producer Al Jean, the staff wanted to explore what the different characters' stances on same-sex marriage were. When the episode aired on February 20th, 2005, it was watched by over 10.5 million viewers, and was the most watched episode of the season. Historically, queer characters would always remain elusive enough in the closet to appease network executives, or they were written as the butt of the joke. South Park aired on Comedy Central in August of 1997. The show's fourth episode, Big Gay Al's Big Gay Boat Ride, featured a gay man named, well, you guessed it, Big Gay Al, who ran a sanctuary for gay animals. In the course of the series, Big Gay Al would openly display his queerness and be an outspoken advocate for gay rights. In the case of Big Gay Al, we had an openly gay character on our screens talking about real issues in the LGBTQ communities. But it was considered a slap in the face to actual LGBTQ viewers seeing this representation written as a joke. So how exactly did we get to this point of arguing with scholars if Big Gay Al was a bastion for cartoon queerness and simultaneously the worst possible choice as a queer cartoon mascot leading into the 21st century? For that, we have to go back to the 1920s. The 20s were rampant with indecent and taboo stories in the media. Silent film comic Fatty Arbuckle had just been charged with manslaughter in the death of an actress. Bisexual film director William Desmond Taylor was found murdered in his Los Angeles home. And movie stars were dying of drug overdoses. It's no wonder the nation's religious leaders were forming local censorship boards and chopping up movies every which way. To meet the demand for decent programming, Hollywood studios banded together under former Postmaster General Will Hays to eventually form the Production Code Administration, or PCA, in the 1930s. The PCA would be responsible for enforcing a list of 36 self-imposed don'ts and be carefuls. It was known as the Hays Code, and Hays himself used the pressure to force filmmakers to toe his line and obey the new rules of the land. Now, you may be asking yourself how the Postmaster General of the United States was made enforcer of moral code in film and TV. And to give some insight, Will Hays was a Republican politician who was known for successfully managing Warren G. Harding's 1920 presidential campaign. Harding appointed Hays to his cabinet as his first Postmaster General. However, he resigned from the cabinet in 1922 due to a little thing called the Teapot Dome scandal, to become the first chairman of the Motion Picture Producers and Distributors of America. It may sound like quite a jump, but hiring Hayes to clean up the pictures was at least in part a public relations ploy, and much was made to his conservative credentials, including his roles as a Presbyterian deacon and past chairman of the Republican Party. The code sets up high standards of performance for motion picture producers, Hayes proclaimed when the new code was unveiled. It states the considerations which good taste and community value make necessary in this universal form of entertainment. Among the code's obscene prohibitions were suggestive dancing, ridicule of religion, and discussions of sexual perversity. Another was, quote, white slavery, but that's a video for another day. Animation quickly adapted to the changes to avoid scrutiny. Overnight, Betty Boop lost her flapper status and got a longer dress to cover those super attractive cartoon kneecaps. The positive portrayals of queer characters were banned entirely, and the only characters in fiction that could be perceived as anything close to queer were given evil roles to be punished. Moving pictures weren't the only medium getting hit hard by this moral reformation of the time. The Comics Code Authority was established in 1954 with the introduction of Dr. Frederick Wortham's book, Seduction of the Innocent, accusing all comics of promoting delinquency and disregard for authority in children. Like the Hayes Code, it was largely a reactionary measure driven by overall fear of censorship and the rise of McCarthyism in the 1950s. In order to get the literal seal of approval from the Comic Authority, a publisher had to submit all comics meeting a certain criterion to be stocked on shelves. There were 41 provisions to stick to in the Comic Censor's Bible to get the seal of approval. Some of these provisions included no sex, no drugs, no cursing, no nudity. The words terror and weird were banned from comic book titles. And while Duke University literally has a course on how comics exist because of queerness, we historically have not seen many queer comic book characters in their film and television adaptations. This is most likely due to a combination of the trickle down from both the Hayes Code and the Comics Code Authority. The Hayes Code did eventually start to weaken when the topics of rape and interracial relationships appeared in more films in the 40s and 50s. Additionally, many filmmakers found covert ways to get around the code. As Oscar-nominated director Edward Dmytryk of The Caine Mutiny, Soldier of Fortune, and The Young Lions explained, the code had a very good effect because it made us think. If we wanted to get something across that was censorable, we had to do it deviously. We had to be clever, and it usually turned out to be much better than if we had done it straight. This workaround was especially notable for animated cartoons, which were starting to make their mark on television audiences in the 40s and 50s. One of the most prominent examples was the introduction of Bugs Bunny on July 27, 1940. Bugs would later be described as the first animated drag queen, due to the character's propensity to cross-dress in women's clothing. Drag superstar RuPaul even credits Bugs Bunny as a starting point for drag. When recounting his childhood in an interview in The Hollywood Reporter, RuPaul said, "As a kid, I always dressed in everything. I would use all the tools available as a human to express myself. No sexual connotation to it. It was just stuff. Bugs Bunny was my first introduction to drag." Bugs also frequently kissed other male characters like Elmer Fudd and Daffy Duck. According to the creators, Bugs was never supposed to identify as queer outright. Through the use of queer coding, or the subtextual coding of a character as queer through mannerisms, clothing, speech, and stereotyping, his actions were meant to be seen as, well, funny. And it seems like the strategy worked. It wasn't until decades later, with the release of Space Jam in 1996 and the rise of the internet in the 2000s, that the Bugs Bunny sexual identity discourse would come into play. In the 1950s, the movie industry faced even more competition from the rise of television and from foreign films, which were not bound by the code. In 1952, the case of Joseph Burstyn Inc. versus Wilson saw the US Supreme Court overrule its 1915 decision that free speech did not apply to motion pictures. This ruling reduced the threat of government regulation in the film industry, and PCA's hold over Hollywood was greatly lessened. In 1952, the United States Supreme Court abolished the Hayes Code entirely, deeming it unconstitutional. The code was eventually replaced by the Motion Picture Association of America's MPAA rating system in 1968. Although it was abandoned over half a century ago, it's easy to see how the legacy of the Hayes Code has lingered in the lexicon of animated television and film. Jumping back to the 1990s, openly gay and queer-coded animated characters were becoming more commonplace. However, there was still a lack of representation in children's animation that would not come to fruition for at least another decade. The popular kids animated series Gargoyles was syndicated for most of its run between 1994 and 96. It would then go on to air on ABC for the last 2 years of its broadcast, from 1996 to 1997. While several of the characters were LGBTQ, they were not confirmed until 10 or so years after the show went off air. Series creator Greg Weisman, in a 2008 interview, stated that the character Lexington was gay. Weisman responded to fans about Lexington's gay identity, saying that Lexington hadn't completely come to terms with his sexuality. He also said that while he wasn't trying to hint with anything in the series, he knew Lexington was gay sometime in 1995 or 96. Although he couldn't have addressed it in the show directly because he would have been fired. In June 2021, Weisman told Insider that he was not allowed to have LGBTQ representation in the series due to fear of backlash, saying that ABC would, quote, freak out over responses and said they were, quote, scared of parental response. The 90s also reigned supreme for children's animation in the form of Walt Disney Animation Studios. Can you spot the common thread between Gaston and LeFou from 1991 film Beauty and the Beast, Jafar from the 1992 film Aladdin, and Scar from 1994's The Lion King? Besides all being queer-coded villains, they were all created by the same man, a gay animator named Andreas Deja. His sexuality has long been discussed as an influence on the development of some, if not all, of these Disney characters. While not stated outright as queer due to the pushback from Disney, these characters, like Bugs Bunny, were queer-coded, like pretty much every other Disney villain, including Governor Ratcliffe in Pocahontas, who is the only male character with makeup, braided hair, and bows, and pink wardrobe, and the sea witch Ursula from The Little Mermaid, who was inspired by the drag queen Divine. Rebecca Sugar argued that it is, quote, really heavy for a kid to only exist, quote, as a villain or a joke in an animated series. In 2011, Deja told News.com that Disney may one day have a movie with gay parents. Is there ever going to be a family that has 2 dads or 2 moms? Time will tell. I think once the Disney chiefs find the right kind of story with that kind of concept, they will do it. In June 1998, Mulan showed up in theaters. In addition to having arguably the most fun and catchy sing-alongs about being a man, the film would include a bisexual captain, Li Shang. Shang in the film loved Mulan when she was disguised as a male alter ego named Ping, and in her true form as a woman. However, Shang was not included in the 2020 live-action remake. One of the film's producers said that Shang was dropped in response to the Me Too movement, arguing that, quote, having a commander officer that is also the sexual love interest was very uncomfortable, and we didn't think it was appropriate. This was met with social media backlash, of course, from fans of the original film and members of the LGBTQ community, with Reed initially surprised by criticism of Shang's removal, but acknowledged that the character had become an LGBTQ icon, or bicon, as he's lovingly remembered. He added that Shang's role would be served by 2 new characters, Commander Tsung and Shang Honghui. Some reviewers called the interactions between Honghui and Mulan to be more homoerotic than Li Shang's in the animated version, and, quote, can be read as bisexual, while others criticized the reasoning of Reed as incorrect. Queer animators and writers like Andreas Deja and Rebecca Sugar have worked for decades to get more LGBTQIA+ representation in their animations. Rebecca once told Insider that when she tried to write a lesbian relationship between Princess Bubblegum and the vampire Marceline, she was stopped by Cartoon Network leadership at every pass. The reason being that the program couldn't be marketable or played in countries where media is censored and being gay is a crime. Cartoon Network executives aren't the only ones to have resisted queer representation in family animation. The creator of The Owl House, which is currently running on Disney Channel, recently revealed the difficulties she faced after proposing gay and bi characters for a recent episode. Writer of The Owl House, Dana Terrace, took to Twitter to explain, "In development, I was very open about my intention to put queer kids in the main cast. I'm a horrible liar, so sneaking it in would have been hard. When we were greenlit, I was told by certain Disney leadership that I could not represent any form of bi or gay relationship on the channel. I'm bi. I want to write a bi character, damn it." The international censorship barriers have always been an additional blockade for queer writers to write queer stories. When the Beauty and the Beast live-action remake came out in 2017, several countries including Malaysia, Kuwait, and even Russia banned or threatened to ban the film from audiences due to having a gay character. To say this is only an international response would be a farce. A theater in Alabama also refused to show Beauty and the Beast because of the depiction of a, quote, gay character. Let me repeat that. A classic drive-in theater in Northeast Alabama said it was canceling plans to show Disney's Beauty and the Beast, you know, a film about a girl who falls in love with an animal, because of the film's queer character. Several US states have, quote, no promo homo laws, which prohibit or limit the mention or discussion of homosexuality and transgender identity in public schools. In theory, these laws mainly apply to sex education courses, but they can also be applied to other parts of the school curriculum as well, and also to extracurricular activities and groups such as gay-straight alliances. Let's not forget that the US Supreme Court only just ruled that the fundamental right to marry is guaranteed to same-sex couples in the year 2015. Taking this into context, we can now understand why the first LGBTQ wedding in kids animation took place as late as 2018. Not all is lost. The rise of streaming apps has been monumental in allowing queer creators to have more autonomy over their characters. Since streaming services don't have to follow FCC guidelines and have fewer cutting room floors to make it through, we are seeing not only more representation in new characters, but new stories for beloved characters that have been forced to stay in the closet all these years. In February 2021, Ralph Farquhar revealed that in The Proud Family, which aired on the Disney Channel from 2001 to 2005, had to use, quote, code to talk about if Michael was gay, to talk about sexuality, and to be sort of underhanded about it. He said this changed with The Proud Family, Louder and Prouder, with the biggest changes to the show being gender identity, obviously racial identity, and quote-unquote wokeness, and said that sexuality can be a lot more in your face, manifesting itself in the storytelling. And the producer of the animated series Scooby-Doo Mystery Incorporated revealed on Instagram the character of Velma Dinkley was a lesbian in his 2010 animated retelling of the 1969 cartoon classic. Tony Cervone made the revelation in response to a comment on a picture he posted of Velma and fellow character Marcy Fleach against a background of pride colors. I've said this before, but Velma in Mystery Incorporated is not bi. She's gay, Cervone said in response to a fan of the franchise who was apparently triggered that Velma's lesbianism went against, quote, the canon of Scooby-Doo lore. And although this has only been a brief overview of queerness in media, we cannot forget about the world of video games and their impact on film and television. While there's been a call for censorship about extreme violence in the past, and an ongoing battle to defend women in the field from online misogyny and sexism, there really hasn't been too much of a problem with censoring queerness in the history of gaming when you think about it. In 1993, Dracula Unleashed gave Alfred Horner, a gay man, a speaking role. It was the first time in video game history that a gay man was given a speaking role in a PC game. There's also The Sims that has existed since 2000, and has never let gender or sexuality have limits. The video game industry is an infinite chasm of gameplay options for people of all identities, and it's only expanding with time and technology. Film and television executives could learn a thing or two. So what is the next chapter for queer creators and their queer creations? To be honest, we're not sure. Insider recently created a database to track the historical presence of LGBTQ and gender minority characters in animated children's television. The number currently rests at 259. And there's no doubt that will continue to grow with time. That doesn't mean that it's all roses and butterflies for our queer animators and characters. We have to continue to tackle the negative stereotypes of queer-coded villains and the quote bury your gaze trope that has plagued so much of our media. Queer characters deserve to be seen because queer viewers deserve to see their stories. We have a long way to go, but we're miles from where we've been. Thanks for watching, Tonglers. Remember to like and subscribe for more exclusive Tongal content. And if you're a creator, be sure to visit the Tongal website at tongal.com for some exciting opportunities.